Hello. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to another Angular Air. So excited for today's episode. My name is Alyssa Nicoll, your host today. And with me, I have Mike in the bottom. I'm going to try to point to you, Mike. Did I do it? I did it, Mike. Hi, Mike. And you have guest. Mike is the co-host today with, maybe is this our producer?
This is Annie, which is short for Anakin. She's
You
one
don't
of
know how
our
much I
four
love
cats
that.
here.
Oh, beautiful. And very much we'll have lots of contributions in the Angular discussion today, I'm quite sure.
She's all set, ready to contribute.
She's ready to go. We also have Manfred on today as a panelist. How are you doing today, Manfred?
I'm fine, thank you.
So glad that you're here. What time is it for you, by the way? It's 11 for me, a.m.
Here it's the best time for developers. It's 6 in the evening.
Is that like universal? Do all developers work best in like the afternoon, evening? Because like,
At least
I
the
don't know.
good ones, I guess.
Yeah. I love it. Welcome, Manfred. Oh, and before I introduce our guest of honor and we dive into today's topic, I'm going to give a huge shout out to our sponsor for today, Brebug. So Brebug is all about empowering enterprise teams with expert Angular consulting, training, and development support. They've been a rock in the Angular ecosystem for years, helping teams ship confidently and stay on the cutting edge. So a big thanks and shout out to Brebug for supporting the Angular community and helping us keep Angular Air free, fun, and full of awesomeness for dev conversations. Go check them out at brebug.com. And now on to our guest of honor today, Aristeidis. How are you, darling? Welcome.
Hello, Alyssa. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
I would like also to add that additionally to being 6 p.m. in the evening, it's also good that for developers that it is Friday 6 p.m. in the evening.
I mean, I feel like it would depend on the project, right? I feel like it would, if it's a passion project, absolutely. I don't know about
deployments on Fridays.
No you hope and pray. Oh, well, welcome, darling. Is it 6 for you as well?
It's 7. We have
7.
1 hour.
Oh.
1 hour between me and Manfred.
Thank you for joining us and such a late evening hour. It's so good to have you on. For those who missed the other episode that you were with us, can you do an introduction, and you can even add anything that's maybe changed between then and now, so people can get to know you a little bit?
Sure. I work as a web development team lead at a company called Plexearth in Greece, which is active in the construction engineering industry. I'm an Angular Google developer expert since 2020, and the fun fact is that I'm so many years a Google developer expert, as many years as I write books. So my first book also was written in 2020, and right now generally I have 2 series that I'm author. It's the Learning Angular series, which is now in the 5th edition. This is the edition that we will see today. And also the Angular projects, which is maybe releasing a new version in the coming year. Who knows?
Hey, is it like a you don't want to make any promises, but you may or may not be working on it type of situation?
I need to make promises to myself first in order to write the book. So
in order. Oh, lots of love in the chat. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you. So today we're going to cover a couple of different topics. One, of course, being your new addition to the Angular book, but also I just wanted to talk about teaching and writing in general, keeping yourself on track for that, and just what's changed with teaching Angular from, like you said, you've done so many versions from the beginning, right, to now. What does that look like? So is there any part in particular you want to dive in? I do want to, let me bring this up real quick. I'll bring it up at different points, but this is Learning Angular. I actually have the physical copy on my shelf.
Yeah.
When did your 5th edition drop? Was that this year, you said?
It was, it actually was scheduled to be released before V19, but for some personal reasons that I also mentioned in the book, it was after V19 on February. So and 2 or 3 months before V20.
What
Sorry. Yes.
What are some topics that you cover in the book? Can you give us an overview?
The difficult thing with this book in relation to the previous edition was that I should also cover Angular from after Angular Renaissance. Angular has a lot of modern practices and techniques. So the previous edition was all about modules, ngIf, ngElse, the old control flow syntax. So after Angular Renaissance, when I started to planning the 5th edition of the book, I wanted to have the new patterns, like the new control flow syntax, Angular signals, but also connect them with the ng modules and the old control flow syntax. So my biggest challenge was to make a bridge between the old Angular syntax and the new Angular syntax in various topics.
Did you make that decision because you didn't want to leave people hanging? Because I feel like a clean way would just be ignore the old way and just teach the new way and have no bridge. But were you worried about, I guess, confusion and like leaving certain teams behind?
Yeah, I as a developer, I always want to work with modern things, right? So in the book also, I wanted to write only the modern things, but my editorial team in part, and also my technical reviewers, which I would like to mention is Thomas Lafargue, who is an Angular GD, and Martina Kraus, who is also an Angular GD. They forced me to, they told me actually, we should also make references to the old approach because not many developers start work with the latest Angular, but they want also to learn the new Angular. So imagine that my goal was to create an environment where the two books will coexist in the mentality of the developers.
I think that boils down to who is the intended audience of the book. Are you trying to reach developers who have been using Angular, or are you trying to reach new developers? And as the author, sometimes it's up to the editor who the intended audience is supposed to be, and then you can tailor the content for that. And reasons for trying to sell books and what have you. But the idea of bridging that gap from old to new kind of welcomes in or existing developers to modern practices. Because I was curious, as you were going to talk about this, how you handled displaying, or if you were including old content or not. Because my first question was going to be, well, with Angular getting rid of modules, less dependencies on RxJS, less on structural directives and everything else, how many pages shorter is the 5th edition than the 4th edition? But if you're bridging the gap, then you're still explaining those principles as well and how they connect to the future. So I'm withdrawing that question.
Was it? I want to know. Was it shorter or was it longer?
I think it was longer. It was longer because this actually gave me the opportunity to add more material about Angular, which in other cases I would have omitted. Let's say, for example, optimization. There is a new chapter about optimization and server-side rendering, for example. In the previous edition, I didn't include it, but now, because it would become shorter, I included it.
Makes sense.
Also,
So one thing I'm wondering is that tactics-wise, do you start with the traditional style of doing Angular with modules and traditional variables, or do you start with standalone and signals and later explain all the legacy stuff or the more traditional stuff?
I follow the second approach. Initially, when I wrote the book, I think standalone was I think it was in developer preview. I don't remember exactly. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, when I started writing the book, I was following the engine module approach. But then in the midway, I started to migrating to the standalone approach. And then I put small notes how something could be done in the old way with ng modules. Or let's say we're explaining the control flow syntax. Explain all the control flow syntax, if or switch, and then I have small, maybe 5-line or 1-paragraph notes saying that if you work with Angular 19 and previously, maybe you will see this syntax with if. If you want to learn more about this syntax, go to the official website, or you can follow along with the previous edition of the book. I would like also to follow up something that Mike said. He said something about audience. Sometimes there are people that say the beginner level is related with the latest version of any technology. For example, beginner V20. But that's not the case, because if you are a junior developer and you go to a company that has programs, that has software with V11 or V12, you are still considered a beginner in Angular in this context.
True. To me, if I was going in as a junior developer, which I am no longer a junior developer, as my hair color now matches the cat who was with me earlier, now the black and white cat. But if I'm going into a company and they're using a technology that I'm not familiar with, I'm going to take some time on my own and try and ramp up my skills in what technology I'm going to be using. So in that case, I'm going to go and say, all right, I'm going to go to Angular's website, and whether or not that's IO or dev, then they will be presented with new content that won't have ng modules, that won't have RxJS there, aside from the router and maybe some forms. But fewer concepts to learn there, and just a simplified or a smaller approach.
Have you guys
Angular has gotten smaller?
Polled audiences recently? A couple months back, I was surprised still by, and it's very similar to what Michael just said, the new stuff in the footnotes on existing stuff. Definitely the way standalone is already 6 versions old, but there's a lot of people that are still using modules, a lot of projects. And I feel like it was a lower number than I expected, but that was a few months back when I was asking audiences, like who's still using modules, who's on standalone, and then even with things like control flow and the new builder and all the other things. So have you guys asked audiences recently? What's your take on where the dev community is at?
I'll be the audience. The application I'm currently working on has a mix. We have some components that are still using ng modules, things that are legacy-ish that haven't been touched in a while, that are pretty stagnant, that haven't been updated or touched in a while, are still using ng modules because there's no active development on it, so there's no reason to touch it. However, everything new is standalone, control flow, everything else. Yeah, on V19, not quite 20 yet, but soon.
Funnily, I had to do an example 2 or 3 weeks ago with ng modules, because there was a bug somewhere in a library, and we were not sure if this bug only occurs when there are modules involved. It was not the case, but we needed to try it out to somehow find a way to create a reproduction, And I really had to think a lot, even though I've used to work with modules for all the time. I had to think a lot how now everything comes together, routing and so on. So yeah, it was a bit special, and it showed how easy it is to forget stuff.
Yeah, my friend was telling me yesterday he's job hunting, and he was like, I just found brand new job posted yesterday. The company needs you to know AngularJS. And I was like, dude, I don't think I could bring back AngularJS, much less module syntax.
I've seen sometimes, and I'm hopeful, sometimes it's the person who is putting together a job title or the job description requirements may not be technical, and that it may actually be Angular. Fingers crossed for them. But yeah,
I got you. It might not actually be an AngularJS position, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
I got you.
a good clarifying question. What version of Angular are you using? And if it's 1.x, then you grab a box of tissues and you cry in the corner for a little bit. And
hey, my first gut reaction was like, "Aw," not cry. Like I have fond memories of AngularJS.
I do too, but even like going back to versions 2 and 4 or 5, then yeah. I still see that as so much better than Angular 1. I mean, it has a place in my heart. Obviously, it's jumped me into a lot of web development, but yeah.
What about you, Ari? Have you seen like where people are at in versions right now? And
I don't work very much with other teams. For example, in the company we are currently V19, so I don't have a lot of experience with teams that are in older versions. But I would like to ask you, the panelists, and also the audience that are watching us. Do you think that at some point with ng modules, we will forget how it is? We will forget its syntax. Like, for example, now I don't remember how to write AngularJS. Do you think that we will at some point?
I think so. I mean, I feel like it's just one of those things. If you're not every day using it, you're gonna have to, like, whenever you finally, like Mike was saying, there's a lot of old code, or even Mike and also Michael was saying that they have beefy root modules for legacy apps like still existing. And so I feel like it's one of those things you'll brush up on once you have to touch it again and you're like, oh, hello. But I think so. I think it'll be just something that we don't talk about in a couple of years. I think it'll just kind of fade away. But I feel like obviously with legacy, it'll always be there. But I don't know. What do you think?
I've already forgotten. I joke. However, and this is like a pain point for me. No, we're talking about the idea of create a module, ng module-less applications, and go down that route, and everything standalone by default now, and everything else. And then just when you think I am completely out of the idea of an ng module, it's time to set up testbed. And it says configure testing module, and I'm like, wait a minute. I know what's going on here. That looks like an ng module syntax. So, testing brings me back, just because it's a way of providing everything you need for testing versus trying to do any other kinds of imports. So I wonder if anything will change with testbed in that regard for the syntax to look less like an ng module and more about anything else. But I don't know.
In that same vein, I'd love to ask you guys what you think about the just reactiveness in the framework, and if you think we'll actually get to a point one day where RxJS is just not a thing, or do you think it'll always be integrated? Mike, heavy sighs.
I saw somebody, and I can't recall, to give credit where credit's due, about talking about potentially the idea of making RxJS optional in Angular. But the big question mark becomes, well, how do you then handle routing? And initially, my thoughts are routers like the default, always there state machine, right? That's how you have state. It's static, not static. It does change, but at the same time, it is defined as this is the state of the application as it is based off of the URL and routing. However, there's other complexities with routing of being able to control, validate, and get into different hooks of the routing lifecycle to be able to control how your application routes. So I'm interested to see what potential solutions come out of not being RxJS based for router.
I think there is some middle ground. I mean, in theory, you say on the one side, when it comes to state, we are going with signals. If it comes to events, we are going with observables or something else. But there is some gray zone in there. So let's just think about the value changes event. There is some state changing. So it's somewhere in the middle, and you can see it from both sides, I guess. And there are for sure some other examples where you have something like this.
Yeah, I'm wondering if potentially that with Angular that the move is less about having the router all in one and maybe a separation. We may and this popped in my head and haven't really fully thought through it, just talking through it. That maybe the router is split into two different packages, where one is the router that will provide the state that is the route, and maybe a router events package that will allow you to tap into that. Or if potentially that maybe the router events aren't fully utilized anymore, and maybe it's all handled through route guards. I don't know. I'm not sure. Different ideas, but things that, again, thinking from the mindset of, all right, what if the router wanted to move to something that isn't RxJS based? Well, it could be a fully static, signal based implementation that's just, this is the state of the router. Be able to get query parameters, parse the routes, and everything else. That all makes sense as signals. However, when you're trying to get into events, validation, preventing different things from happening, are guards sufficient, or do you need other listeners that would be event-based and RxJS based?
Michael is agreeing with both of you and saying that ng extension, I don't know how to say injection, I don't know if that's like one word you have to say, has a lot of signal utils that clear up RxJS needs, but events still need RxJS for sure. So I need to try that out. Have you guys tried that? The ng extensions? I have not tried that.
I've played around with it a bit, and I've looked a bit into the source code. So it's really well written, the source code.
Oh, that's good to hear.
And you can learn a lot from it. Also, when it comes to using existing signal stuff to implement higher order helper functions. I guess sometimes you need some helper function on a higher abstraction level. And yeah, but it's really great. So you can learn a lot from it.
What about you, Ari? You think we're going to get rid of RxJS one day for good?
Yeah. When I started planning the Learning Angular edition, I wanted to somehow put some signals on it. There was a chapter about RxJS and observables. So initially, I thought, okay, I will create a chapter reactivity in Angular, and I will devote 70% in RxJS and 30% in signals. Then after some thought, I decided that I should make a separate chapter about signals. So the RxJS and observables chapter became a bit smaller, and the remaining pages were devoted to the signals, to the Angular signals. So if you are asking me what it is to learn Angular in 2025, I would say signals again. Because signals start to emerge in the framework quite rapidly. For example, we have seen that there is an experimental version of HTTP resource, which uses signals. We may see in the future signals in forms or in the router, like Mike said and Manfred. So I think that signals will take over the reactivity context, the reactivity, area in Angular somehow. If I would bet now, I would bet on signals.
Do you guys know if other frameworks have this concept?
Signals? Yeah. I think it's in quite a lot of frameworks meanwhile. Of course, Solid, which was kind of a role model for signals in Angular. At least the Angular team talked a lot to Ryan Caniotto about his vision for signals. I think React has it. I think Svelte has something like this. So it seems to be quite popular currently. On the other side, people are also using RxJS with all the other framework worlds. So I guess at the end of the day, you need both. At the end of the day, you have state and you have events. And when it comes to events, or as Alex Rickabo likes to put it, when there is a notion of time, then you need something else. Then signals alone are not enough. Stuff like, debouncing or orchestrating several data flows, merge map, switch map, and so on. This is, if you ask me, where RxJS is really shining, and I would not like to re-implement this by hand. So yeah, so I guess you need both.
I like to think of RxJS as a tool that you may not necessarily need when creating an Angular application. Again, if we can have an implementation of the router where we can essentially get the route as state through a signal, and I think that there may be a lot more applications out there that don't necessarily need RxJS. That informs, as long as you have a way of interacting with a form through signals and a way of getting values out of a router without using RxJS, then it's just a tool that if you need to debounce, if you need to orchestrate events or handle more complex scenarios, then it's a tool you can bring in. But from the default applications being generated, that it's a tool that you don't need. And you can think critically about whether or not you need to bring in a tool or not.
I'm really curious, Ari, with the new book and with signals, do you think, especially since we've kind of come to the conclusion that both are needed, at least right now, do you think that signals has made Angular easier or more difficult for beginners to get into?
To be honest, initially when signals were introduced, I wasn't a big fan.
No,
I
really?
was more not a fan of signals, but also not a fan of RxJS. I always like to work with simple arrays and variables. Okay, this is my thing. And when I started working with signals initially, okay, just creating a signal and setting a value was cool. But when I started to work with linked signal resource, it felt a bit, strange to me, weird. I like to think with logical flow in my code. Okay, let's say, for example, we have a button. The user clicks the button, we call a function, and this function creates an HTTP request and subscribes. With signals and RxJS, this is not the thing. It's how do we say, the declarative approach. So this declarative approach that signals have also confuses me a bit. And in the fifth edition of the book, I don't go too deep to signals. I explain set, the usual functions, set, update. I don't cover linked signals or resource. Generally, in my books, I have a mentality not to cover developer or experimental things. I only want to work with state. So it's pretty basic things in the book. But I guess in the next edition, whenever this will come, I will need to go deeper and explain link signal, resource, Rx resource maybe. That would be difficult.
Yeah.
But these are things that are needed by developers.
What about you guys? Do Manfred or Mike think it makes it easier or harder for the new people?
To me, easier. And it's not even close. When you think about, all right, I need to know what a signal is and how to use it. All right, well, I can create it and I provided a value and it has a value. No matter when, it always has a value. All right, cool, I've got that. And if I need to change that, I can call set or I can call update. That's three things that I need to know. If I need to worry about observables, then I need to know, well, how do I create them? All right, well, then I get into subjects. All right, now I need to learn subjects. And then I need to know how do I get values out? I have this. And then, all right, I need to be able to change the value. All right, then I need to learn operator, a lot more things. Last time I checked, there was over 100 and some operators for RxJS. Do you need to know all of them? No, you can probably get by with learning 5 to 10. But what you need to learn and what you need to understand with that is a lot more than with signals. And I think the mental load of somebody coming in, no experience with either, if you look at what you need to learn to be able to use RxJS or use signals wins in terms of simplicity.
Yeah, so I also think eventually in midterm or long term, and especially for new developers, it will be easier. And this is also the goal of the Angular team, to streamline the usage of Angular to make it easier. Perhaps in the transition time, it might be a bit more difficult because you will see both in your projects, and not every one of us will start at the green field. So perhaps, yeah, first of all, it needs to be a bit more difficult in order to make it a bit easier. So perhaps it's
But
Yeah.
to be clear, while there's less to learn initially, the signals caps out in terms of what you can do with a signal and what have you. Whereas RxJS, there's so much power there, and that's why the initial complexity is there. But they do have different use cases.
Mm.
But
I
for
find-
the
I found-
smaller,
Yeah.
sorry, real quick, for the smaller use case of what signals provides a solution for hey, this is state at a given time without any time element to it. Yeah, it's just a smaller API and an easier situation to understand.
Sometimes I find myself confused and I don't find it very easy to reason about the code because of, let's say, with the arrow functions that we have in linked signal or results. I mean, when you have just simple variables, it's very easy to reason about this code and explain this code. But when you see arrow functions, code inside the arrow functions, other code, it confuses me sometimes. So I think it's more, like Manfred said, it's more, it's just a change of mentality. Someday we will get used to signals and everything will go on.
I'm curious, do you have any other things that were big changes in this current edition? Because I know signals was a big change. I think, did you talk about control flow? Was that,
Yes.
or did you
yes.
already have that? Okay.
Yeah. The big changes were the introduction of control flow syntax. I was forced to change all my code because it would be that was a nightmare, Control flow syntax. ng modules. No, sorry, not ng modules. Standalone. Yeah, standalone ng modules. Server-side rendering, and some things about testing.
Do you remember what changed in testing?
I removed the router testing because I used the router testing hardness because it's much easier. But again, I think that router testing, in my opinions, it's not unit testing. Maybe it's integration testing. I don't know. A component integration testing.
Michael in the chat was saying, I remember your book's approach to control flow was good. So even though it sounded painful for the rewrite, it was good. Good stuff.
So I'm wondering, when going through all your chapters, is it more a manual task for you to update the listenings in there? Or is there some automatism, like this listening is correlating with this snippet in this branch? Did you think about something like this?
I couldn't find an easy way to do it like you said. I mean, I could use a monorepo, but then I would be forced to explain monorepos and NX in the users of the book. So I do it manually, but I did a little trick. When generally when I release a book, I wait for about 2 weeks after the release of Angular, after the latest release of Angular, to publish the book, because these 2 weeks I do all the manual thing to upgrade the code snippets. It's necessary. for me.
Mm.
I haven't found
Yeah.
something automatic. Maybe now with AI, but I haven't thought about that more.
Mm.
Maybe we could, Manfred, maybe we could collaborate on that, because I also know that you're an author of books.
Yeah,
And
but
find ways.
I have the same issues as you. So updating the book and making sure the listenings are all up to date, you don't miss something in there, and making sure the text is correlating with the listenings is really difficult.
Is it just manual? Is it just like, like page by page, or have you found a way to like
Not a
select?
good one. In the last edition I wrote, we had several branches, but it felt a bit like moving the complexity around from updating to the branches. So yeah, I'm not sure. So my trick is having a very strict editor. Last time, a good friend of mine was the editor, and he is really strict. He is exactly the opposite of me when it comes to this. He's really strict, and he sees a mistake from a huge distance. So this was really awesome to produce quality.
Is it exhausting though? If it sounds very tedious, like a line by line situation.
It's not the funniest job. I always say writing a book is not the funniest job, but having a book written, this is nice.
Oh, yeah. But would it be easier to do a fresh one? Like if you're like, you know what, so much has changed, we're making a new one. Or do you think that would be still more work than updating?
Boy, perhaps both. What do you think, Alice?
I wouldn't like to create a new book from scratch, because now when you go from edition to edition, you have an agenda. You know where to go. If you start from scratch, you say, okay, what should I cover?
Mm.
Even when I started writing the Learning Angular series, I started on the second edition or the third, the second edition. The first edition was written by Chris Noring from Microsoft, and another Angular GD. When I initially took the existing code, I said, okay, I will change everything. But it was very difficult, because it was like creating a new book from scratch. The difficult thing is when you take someone else's content and you need to add your pieces. But then in subsequent versions, in subsequent editions, where I only needed to change some bits here and here, and I have a vision where my book wants to go, it was much easier.
Okay, that's good. Good to know. Do you have any?
It's also a trick. So some people say, if you don't know what to write, just write down something that you have a first version. It does not need to be perfect, but if there is already something, you can start discussing, perhaps with yourself or with someone else, about what's already there.
I love that. Do you both have advice for people who want to, whether it's through a book or maybe it's just mentoring new Angular developers, from lessons you've learned? Anything that sticks out as don't teach them this, or start here, or don't do that?
I could talk a bit about authoring, because I have prepared some content, if you like, some tips.
Yeah.
Then generally, my first tip is create your brand, not the brand that others want. I will tell you an example. When we were planning about the cover of the book, Pact wanted to have colors that match the Angular logo, the Angular colors. But and they proposed me some designs, but then I said to them, I want my own colors. Why should be why should be like Angulars? They told me that, okay, all the Angular books in Pact have the same color. Yes, but I want my own colors. I want my own brand. I'm Aristeidis. I'm not Angular. I'm not like the others. And this is very important if you want to achieve in this sector. You need to be yourself. You need to create your own brand and support it. My second tip is, when you start writing, maybe also an article, it's not tied to books. there are three steps, in my opinion. The first is research on the topic. The second is apply what you have learned about the topic. And the third is refine. And after you refine it, then go again and do research. Why is that? Because I had a similar experience with the control flow syntax. Okay. When I first wrote the book, I used the old control flow syntax. I applied the old control flow syntax in the material, and then I started refining the content around it. And then Angular came and said, okay, we have a new control flow syntax. Cool, no problem. Then I went again to the research step and researched about the new control flow syntax. I applied the new control flow syntax in the content, and then I refined the accompanying the other content that surrounded, the code snippet to match. And my third tip, which is I think is the most important, especially in technology books, is that when you need, especially with Angular, okay, you need to have a goal in which Angular version you want to release your book. Because if you say, okay, I will release the book and I don't care about Angular versioning, you will never do it because something will change every time and it will make the authoring longer. So you need to find a way to bridge the new techniques, the deprecations, and support all the some of the older approaches in your content. These three will make a good content, in my opinion.
So the last one, it's like a line in the sand where you're like, I realize it's going to keep changing and keep releasing and keep updating, but this is where this book's line is, and you're like, have you ever like shifted it late in the game? We're like, fine, or are you very strict about it?
Yes, many times I said, okay, I will release the next version, and then to the next version.
I got you.
That's because books are just like signals. They're a snapshot in time. It's a particular state. It doesn't evolve over time.
Did you just make a tech metaphor?
I did
so much, Mike.
It's interesting that we talked about that, but it kind of applies to the idea of what we're talking about, that you have to pick, all right, this is the point in time of what the book has as content for what is currently available. And again, if you want to iterate or you get another value or the promise resolves of a new version of Angular that I want to have a book for comes out, then you have a new edition, then you need to update or set that signal of the book, and a new value is there.
I wish Angular could release once in a year. And there was a post on X a long time ago that someone said, could we have fewer releases inside the year? And I said, yes, please. I don't want, it's very tiring to release books every now and then,
But
I think it would be good.
Yeah, but the problem is that this is the amount of authors out there, and this is the amount of developers, and developers want features. They want features. So
I don't know, man. I feel like the Angular team might be like, yes, we can release once a year, and then they would still just like slip it out, Like sometimes I'm like, wait, when did they release that? They didn't even wait for the next version.
I mean, there's a lot to be discussed there about Angular release strategy of, does there have to be breaking changes? Couldn't we just say, all right, at minimum, we're going to have different versions, minors and revisions and everything else at any time, but we will not have a major release any more often than 6 months. So basically say, hey, we won't have any breaking versions for at least 6 months. And then if there's nothing breaking, then just keep adding features and revving the minor number.
I know Ari's not alone with the content creator stress of just so much changes, trying to keep up, trying to build those bridges for your audience, trying to figure out where is my audience at right now so that I can, pull them forward, but not overwhelm them. Because I remember like at the very beginning of the Angular Renaissance, I was like, this is a lot. This is like a lot. Like looking at the roadmap ahead, I was like, this is going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot to overwhelm people. But I don't know, Mike, do you not think that I know devs want new things, but also I have seen a lot of just overwhelmed feelings in where they
can get
feel
new things
behind
without a major version bump, though.
yes,
Right.
yes.
But so that adds to the complexity is that there's so many different packages now, dev and dev tools and everything else, where all of the major versions are synced up. It's not so much the features or anything else, but the major versions are synced up. So if any of them would need a breaking change and therefore a major version bump, then all of them need it. So, but I think that the every 6 months as the rule may be more corporate based. I'm not sure, so that corporations can plan for upgrades. I don't know, but I kind of like the idea of minimum 6 months in between versus every 6 months. That's an interesting discussion point. At least interesting to me.
I'm looking at the time. We've got a couple minutes left before I want to dive into picks. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover from your book or from learning Angular in 2025 today that you think we should spend our last couple minutes on? Anything we didn't cover yet?
I think that signals are the most important topic. I mean, okay, we have the Angular SSR story, but I think that's Angular SSR, it's a bit, let's say, it's a feature that is very much heard, but it's not applicable in every application. The Angular team has done a great job in all the features that they have delivered, but I feel that SSR is just a small part in Angular applications that are out there. Maybe that's my, my thought. I don't know.
I think it's important that we have this new SSR story, because otherwise, when you do the technology selection for a company, they will ask you, oh, why doesn't Angular has a story here? But I agree with you. At the end of the day, I think signals are, for the majority of people out there using Angular, they're the more important aspect.
Especially for the performance side of things, with looking at the horizon of what is probably going to be coming. And we've seen a few experimental or dev preview, I'm not sure the exact status, of looking at playing with zoneless, having applications running without Zone.js. So another library that you can take out of the dependency tree of saying, all right, I don't really need this, so I am going to rely on signals telling the template when to update. So even more on top of the desire and the need to learn signals as like a good starting point. Obviously, you need to learn syntax and everything else as you get started with a new framework. If you're starting new with Angular, that you need to know, oh, this is how I actually dynamically put something into the template. Okay, cool. This is how I conditionally do it with the control flow pieces. But I think the biggest gain is going to be knowing what a signal is and knowing how and when to use the different types of signals.
Thank you, chat, so much for all the questions and the comments. And thank you, gentlemen, for leading this conversation and your insights. I think we're going to wrap and have, where and what. I'm going to highlight your book real quick. Where and what formats is Aristeidis' book available? So we have it here up on Amazon, but I'll let you answer this question as far as like other formats and versions and things.
It's available on Amazon in ebook and hardcover format, and you can also get it from the Pact Publishing website, which is pactpub.com. Right now, on the Amazon website, there is a very big discount, as you can see. It's sold around the price here is only euros. Sorry about that. It's about $17, something like that. I don't remember.
Amazing. I think I got all the questions. So I think we are good to go as far as wrapping. Do you guys have any picks? Anything you want to highlight from this week that was inside or outside of technology? I know Ari does.
Shall I start?
Yeah, kick us off. What do you
Okay,
got?
yeah. I have one technology-based and another fun-based. The technology one is I started experimenting with Firebase Studio, and it's amazing. I built an application that uses a WebGL to show a 3D globe, and the application was written with Tailwind CSS, React, Next.js, and TypeScript. But I don't know either Tailwind or React or Next. So without touching any code, I created this application. I will share the post that I have done on X in the chat. If you want, you can share it, Alyssa.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing because with just maybe I tried 20 prompts, I got this amazing application. I said, wow.
That's really cool.
Firebase Studio rocks, yeah.
When I was playing with Firebase Studio, I kept trying to get it to use Angular, and it was like not happy about it. And so I never got to the point where I accepted. I was like, I will not write in React even through third party. So it's good. It's good that you mentally got past that. I did not. Oh, you said a tech and a fun one. What's your fun one?
The fun one is that from since a year ago, I started learning stand-up paddle. Stand-up paddle is like a board that you step on it, you put it on the sea, and you just go for a walk. With how do we say this one?
My family calls it paddle boarding, and you're like standing on like a surfboard almost, right? Yeah.
And we call it SUP or stand-up paddle. Yeah, paddle
that is a lot of work. Like it's exhausting. Are you good at it? I'm very not good at it.
Yeah, I started without knowing how to have balance, but I saw that I have it. I can do it. So now, because I live right near the sea, I take it and go up and down all the time, even while working. My break is stand-up paddling.
I love it. That's awesome. Yeah. What about you, Manfred or Mike? You got any picks inside or outside of tech this week? Anything you want to highlight?
I don't have anything this time. I think I've told you all the important stuff, Star Trek and Dexter, and for me, currently, that's it.
Yeah, I was going to follow up on my pick for Dexter from last week, because I had no spoilers because I hadn't watched it, but I am, aside from today's episode that just released, I am all caught up and I like it. I've already liked it.
Good stuff.
I've just seen it. So you never find out whom he killed this time. So it's awesome. It's awesome.
I've not yet started that one. I'm working on Andor right now, which maybe I'm really behind. Like, has everyone already? Is that like way old news? It's like Star Wars show, right?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
I also just finished up The Bear. That was pretty good. Season 4 came out and released all at once, and I am almost through season 2 of The Sandman on Netflix.
Yes, I was on my international flight home, and that's when I started that one. And I was like, I really should wait for Zach. And I got home, and he was like, I've already watched it. And I was like, I shouldn't have waited for Zach. No, my picks are 2 conferences that I am going to. I'm polishing up some talks and finishing some demos for them. I'll be at DevUp in like a week and a half in St. Louis. So if you're in the area, hit me up. My DMs on Twitter are always open. We can hang out outside the conference. And then right after that, I'll be in Kansas City for KCDC, speaking and doing a workshop. So lots of front-end animations, an ADHD soft talk, and then also an Angular workshop. So hit me up if you're in those cities, or if you will be for the conferences. I'd love to hang out with you. But that's That's it. Oh, and there's lots of shout outs. Steve said that he's ordering the paperback right now. Michael said he read the digital version on Amazon. And Andre was just thanking us. Appreciate our conversation and being here. So lots of love in the chat, Ari. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great. I really like to see you again after some time.
Amazing. And I hope to see all of you at some point this year. Hopefully I'll be in the area of where each of you are at. We're all over the place, but before then, enjoy your Friday and your weekend. And thank you everyone for comments and questions. We appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.